Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 265. We have a returning guest who hasn't been on in a while, so I'm anxious to get talking to Ryan in a bit. But we're going to do what we usually do. We'll kind of go around anything anyone has to promote. We can do that. You're on my channel, so I assume maybe you know who I am, unless you're coming from something that Ryan sent out. You don't know who we are. But yeah, we're the Artcasters. We do this show every week. And it kind of bounces back and forth from my channel to Josh's channel. We'll get to Josh in a minute. But the only thing really I have to promote right now, other than, this is my YouTube channel, so I've got a bunch of videos on here. And I got a website at circworks.com right there. And right now, I'm hawking these shirts for my comic book, Young and the Dead. Oh, you got one, Josh. All right. So I didn't even need this because I got a model right there. So I am in this program called Merch by Amazon, where I'm selling T-shirts on Amazon. And in order to get to the next tier, I think right now I have to only sell like maybe 10 more shirts or whatever. So if
and they're comfortable. They're comfortable shirts. Like it's nice and like loose, but like good fabric and stuff. Like it's great.
Yeah, and there's a couple different styles, different colors. This one's got a yellow logo, and you can get different color shirts on it. Mm-hmm. Josh has got the black, and then there's also a white logo and darker fabric. But anyway, and these are like priced to sell. I'm not even making any money off of them. I'm just trying to get to the next tier. So they're like, for this one's a premium. I think this one's around $14.50, and then the one Josh has, I think, is the standard shirt, and that's like $13.50. So anyway, that's what I got to promote. What's going on with you, Josh? What do you got?
All right. As usual, I have my graphic novel, which is 2 stories. It's 120 pages, hand-lettered, hand-inked, autobiographical graphic novel about faith and mental illness, and it's available right now. There's multiple stores selling it, but I'm trying to point people to Amazon because those rankings affect the sales of books, unfortunately. Like, I wish it were all indie shops, but it's not. So please go to Amazon. The plus side, if you have Prime, there's free shipping. So check it out. It's a pretty heartfelt story, and I think you guys will dig it, especially if you like cartooning and hand lettering and inking and stuff. Yeah.
All right. And our guest today is Ryan Friant. And like I said, returning guest from Dream Syndicate Art Dolls. That's his website where you can find his stuff. And I don't know, Ryan, what you got anything to promote? Anything to talk about?
Well, you can just check me out on my YouTube channel, the Dream Syndicate Art Dolls. So, if you, and even going to my website will get you to all the things. And you can also find me over on Instagram at dream_synd. And Twitter and fun stuff like that too.
All right.
So, yeah, I mean, nothing other than the work more generally. Nothing specific to promote today.
All right. Okay. Cool. And all right. So as usual, we usually give our guests the chance to choose the topic. And Ryan wanted to talk about the 80-20 rule and how it relates to artists or creatives in general, and that's something I've been thinking of because I got a bunch of different things going on, and some of them are more successful, and it really, the more I analyze it that 80-20 rule is it seems pretty legit. So if you're not familiar with the 80-20 rule as a basic, I mean, and maybe you can explain it a little better because you've been thinking about it, but Ryan, but it generally 80% of the benefits to what you do come from about 20% of the work. Is that correct? Or
yeah. So basically what you kind of constantly go through this process of reevaluation of finding what is the fruitful 20% of what you're doing. And then like that may change over time and you kind of reharvest, like the same way that Josh right now mentioned specifically promoting Amazon, because he knows like more, a higher ranking in Amazon is going to get more exposure to more people and sell more units. Like he may make way less per unit, but the network effect of having more people aware of what he's doing will promote him as an artist and sell more books. And then as he releases more, it'll be another way to find him eventually. And the same thing with you now, like, so selling your shirts basically at cost right now, right? Like that's not a profit benefit to you, but it is a thing that's going to allow you to bring in more profits over time.
Exactly. Yeah. Because once I moved up to the next tier, I mean, it's 5 times the amount of shirts that I can upload. Not 5. Is it 5? Yeah, 5. About 5 times. Because right now I can upload up to 100 shirts. I get to the next tier, I can upload 500 shirts. So I mean, that's the goal. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it did make me a little sad to not think to put on my Wake and Make shirt, but also it's a little chilly here on the East Coast.
Well, see, and that's the other thing. Once I get to the higher tiers, then I can put it on hoodies and I can put it on like sweatshirts and things. But right now, you've got to focus on what sells the most. It's coming back to everything will come back to this, I'm sure. But what sells the most are just standard T-shirts. So that's usually what I have it on as a standard T-shirt. And just the only reason I have the premium of this one is because that's the one I wanted. So, but other than that, it's all standard T-shirts. But once I open up those other slots, I can take the design, and then I can focus on designs that I know sell and put those on other products as well. But it doesn't make sense to do that right now with the limited real estate that I have on Amazon for T-shirts and stuff. So.
Yeah, focus on what moves. And yeah, it's way easier to justify selling like a under $15 T-shirt than like say a $30, $40 hoodie. Like it's just, for a thing that depends how much connection somebody has to the thing. But also we live in a time where things might be kind of tight for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of sometimes it's a hard ask. And I know people have reached out to me that I know have kind of experienced some hard times and they bought a shirt. So, I mean, I'm like, yeah, I really appreciate it, especially in those cases. So, but so what would you say right now? Are you putting, what is that 20% of yours that you're doing that's giving you 80% of the results?
Well, so like, I think about like the balance of like what I put into YouTube versus what I put into say my website, and like both have merit and value. I mean, what really has to come first is just doing the work and getting a reaction from it. And then like, so that's priority number one, because if you don't have good finished work that people are going to connect with, you don't have anything as an artist. So, but then the balance between like doing anything on social media versus say building up your own website that you own the keys to the door, as it were. Right. It's like all of the social media things is like it's rented real estate in a high traffic area, but people are also very distracted by everything that's going on, and the terms and conditions of that rented area can change at any given moment. Versus like your website, as long as you're not doing anything particularly horrendous or outright illegal, you're golden. Like once you get in, having your own website is almost building your own like factory or commercial thing. But then you also have to build all the roads that connect to this structure that you're building. Is kind of the way I'm thinking of it, and like just. I've been trying to like just balance those two things out.
Yeah. It's and like with some of the like the digital products I sell, if somebody bought from my website, because I don't have to split the profits on that, I make a lot more money. So if I sell one of my digital products on my website, I can probably make about as much money as I could selling 2 or 3 on one of these bigger marketplaces. But those bigger marketplaces, they can sell way more than I do. And then there's even some out there that sell it, they'll run these specials, like they'll run like a limited time special where they run them like, pretty much dirt cheap. But because they sell so many of them, it's a pretty decent chunk. So it's kind of weird. And sometimes I'm like, sometimes I'm wondering, well, if people are, if I'm charging or some other marketplaces are charging this amount and these other places are selling them for less, but it's like, again, it's like a limited time. Sometimes I feel bad, like, well, what if somebody doesn't get the deal? But I've never heard anyone complain really about that. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if they're price sensitive
Yeah.
about things they wouldn't buy at that particular
Yeah, and
moment.
that is the thing. I mean, if they want, they can shop around. Like anyone that goes to one of those marketplaces, and I think some people may do that. I know sometimes I'll do that. If I go to a bigger place, I might go to another website or shop around and see if I can find it cheaper. Some people don't care or bother to do that. So
So,
Go ahead, Josh.
sorry, I just wanted to clarify because like my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding of the like 80-20 thing was like you kind of, it's almost like it's applied in a lot of things like business, like personal life, like exercise, stuff like that, where you take a look at what you're doing and you look for the 20% of what you're doing that's most effective so that you can double down on it and then kind of build from there. And every, 4 months to 6 months, you kind of reassess, look at the 20% of what you're doing then, and kind of try to put most of your effort into that 20%, kind of letting the other 80% sort of filter out a little bit. And like, to me, I find that really useful because like before I started doing 2 stories, like in graphic novels, like all I wanted to do outside of professional work, which I'm already doing full time, outside of like having a roof over my head, I just wanted to make graphic novels. And I would catch myself in these scenarios where it's like, that would just get kicked down the road, right? Because of a client. And even right now, like I have a client who came in who is a really good client, this clothing company in Germany that I do stuff for. And I'm putting that on the back seat to my comic because so I'm going to work on that a little bit over the weekend, but I can't let it push my comic. And part of that was like kind of doing an 80-20 kind of assessment. And it wasn't necessarily like at what was most profitable, but like what was my aim and my goal as an artist, and then like what was I spending the majority of my time doing. And I found like I wasn't even like putting in 20% of my time on comics, and yet like that's what I wanted to do. And so like for me, kind of disregarding a lot of that extra stuff, even though it's tempting to like take the extra income or like kind of keep that thing perpetuating, I'm like, as long as I have like my needs met and my family's needs met, then like that excess time, like that 80-20 thing is really essential to just kind of being able to accomplish anything. Because it's making comics or making animations or making like claymation figures, these are time consuming things. And so like if we're not kind of focusing on that small percentage of like what like that small percentage of that's actually effective at getting what we're trying to accomplish done, and kind of not disregarding some of that 80%, I think we can just end up in like stasis, much like a company where it's like, a lot of companies have like done statistics and it's like the first 30 minutes at most offices is waste. Like it's just complete waste. And so a lot of people, when they reassess a business, they start reassessing like those first 30 minutes of the day, because it's like, what's the purpose of having like this 30? And I know some of it's getting situated and stuff like that, but it's like you want to target like the most effective parts of the day and try to double down on those and accelerate that and grow that. And it's like it's similar where it's like to me, to make time to do what you're intending to accomplish is really important as an artist, because you can really you can drown in that 80% and get nothing done.
Yeah. Well, also too though, like, so you're talking about like optimizing the 80-20, right? Like you don't necessarily have to be optimizing for profits. It could be for satisfaction or for like a future like nest egg of a thing that you own. And it's an investment in that there are risks to investments. So like if this thing pays off in the end, like say a movie gets made of it or something crazy like that, like that is a different thing than like the, taking a $2,000 to $3,000 gig that's like is money in the bank now, but like long term,
and fulfillment wise, like, does it get me any closer to the goal? It's kind of like the same with workouts too, right? Where it's like with a workout, like, you can look at a workout and there's like the most effective part of your workout is probably the most important. And then like the other stuff, like a lot of that can be lost. Like a lot of that's just waste, you want to kind of isolate to the stuff where you're like gaining muscle or losing weight or getting cardio or whatever the thing is your whole purpose of working out is. But we as humans, we spend so much time doing that, like trying to put all our effort into like 100% of everything, and it's like that's just going to cause burnout.
There's also the idea that like, so if anybody's had a shit job before, raise your hand. But like, so like the management is always coming to you with, this is a priority. This is a priority. So like everything is a priority. So therefore nothing is a priority. Yeah. So, like people like lose the value of what a priority is if you use that word to describe everything.
Yeah. When everything's rush, nothing's rush.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing up some of Corey's comments here. And like I've what Josh brought up, I've had that same thing, because like with my comic, Young and the Dead, I stopped working on it for pretty much all of last year with everything else that was going on. I had to because I lost a bunch of my client work and everything. So I'm like, unfortunately, I mean, this is what I love doing comics, and that's really a passion of mine, but it didn't bring any money. So I had to make the decision to kind of shelf it for a little while and focus more on things that could possibly bring in money, probably, are better equipped to bring in money. And then this year I just decided, well, I can't afford to spend 80% of my time, or probably even 20% of my time on the comic, but I can afford to spend an hour a day. So that's what I've been doing, just so I can have that satisfaction. So, yeah. But like you said, it's not like Ryan, like you said, it's not always monetary. I mean, I kind of need to work on that book, just because, for one, I mean, I can't just stop. I mean, I've already started. And two, I get a lot of joy out of creating that book. So
yeah. And for me, like I found, and I'm sure you're in a similar position, Scott, but it's like when I wasn't working on, whenever I'm not working on comics, I just don't feel healthy. Like I don't feel right. But if I'm like working on a comic, like regardless of whatever I'm doing for pay, like professionally, it's like it keeps my mind centered and like and my that creative part that wants to be making stories like kind of at bay, so it doesn't kind of sabotage I don't know.
So Ryan, what in your own business with the art dolls, what is it, because you were talking about basically analyzing what you're doing and reassessing things. So what is it that you find that's working? Is there like a particular, like, do you have a particular print, or based on the doll? What is your primary, is it selling the actual, I assume it's selling the actual physical art dolls, but that's a one-off thing, right?
I mean, like basically right now it's kind of like the same way that anybody would be, say, starting a webcomic or anything like that. Like it's just largely done at a loss, like, or a break-even point. So like what I try to work on and work out is creating things that are reproducible. Like I've been starting to mess around with, say, silicone molds, so then I can do like a resin cast of things.
Yeah.
Because like I found that, like, so back when I used to do gallery shows, which, in terms of things that like I've pretty much roundly decided to not do, is like galleries, because like, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 shows I would actually sell. And like, that was another thing that was basically like a vanity project. Like it was done at a loss. Like I have so many friends and acquaintances that like are like kind of, like they're artists that have like shown up in Juxtapose or whatever, but like, a lot of them, like day to day, you can see they're not really getting by too well. And like that's, so there's like renowned artists that a lot of people look up to, but if you like understood the inner workings, like things are not great, and you need to figure something out. And so like for me, like I'm trying to figure things out in such a way that it's not going to be a great deal of my individual labor, like to just make a sculpture or a piece that I can cast and then like, maybe sell the resin model as like a model kit. Cause that's a thing. Some people just like to buy these things and paint them.
Yeah.
And so I've been kind of working towards being able to do that. Like maybe some of them I'll just sell for, depending on the size, $40-$60. And it's just like a cleaned up cast that like I've spent some time, cleaning up the seam lines and things like that. And people can have it and paint it however they want. Or, I could do one that I paint up and try to sell that for a few $100 and, see if there's any takers.
Yeah.
But because like, the art dolls, like, it just feels like what the market will bear for them, it's not worth it. It's like, it's literally, I'd have to make like 4 to 6 of them a month, and then like 100% of them would have to sell. And like anybody that's also done, like fine art or anything like that, selling 100% of what you make, unless you're like the top 0.5% of artists, like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So it's also like kind of having a realistic outlook on that.
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of inventory of things that won't sell, and that's kind of why I switched my focus to digital products for the most part. I haven't done a physical print in years, I don't think. But so when you're approaching creating a resin cast, say if you're going to base it on one of the creations that you've already created, for instance, I assume that you would pick the one that sells the best, right? Yeah, that kind of happening, that 80-20 principle. If you have,
so you can only base what you're going to sell off of first reaction, because like the product has to exist, and then it has to exist in a finished form that like somebody can pretty clearly see like what this thing is. So like there is still a little bit of like, all right, I made this thing. Does anybody want to buy it? Like and you buy the materials, you buy like casting resin type of stuff, and you make the thing, and then you just see if there's a market for it. And if that works, then you make more of those, more color variations of it. And if it doesn't, you go on to trying the next thing and the next thing. But like every time I've finished a piece of art, I advertise that there's like a print available for it. I mean, not advertising hardcore. I'm not spending money. I'm just kind of offhandedly mentioning it towards the end of a video, and it's like in all the YouTube outbound links and stuff like that. And all that stuff is available through like print on demand stuff, but like people aren't buying the prints. Like I price them at so like retail at 40. So like I forget even with my bit is on that. But it's a thing I don't have to touch or ship, but also they're, nobody's buying them. Like
so
I think
your prints are print on demand then?
Yeah. I'm using Imprint, I think is the one I've been sending traffic to. Like, so you get some clicks, but not, it doesn't end in a transaction. And I think part of that is, like if it were at a convention or something like that, and somebody wanted that memento of seeing the work, there's that. But like, it's kind of, there's this thing, there's no time sensitivity, there's no time pressure. Right. So when something's always available, there's no pressure to get it because it's always available.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can definitely see your stuff, selling it at shows, having the dolls out there and having the prints. Like if they can't afford that, have you done any shows like that? Or
I haven't done any of the big conventions just because like the initial buy-in was so much. I've done like some local shows here. Like there's a thing called the Punk Rock Flea Market, and like I would sell some cheap stuff. Like that was the kind of thing that really cemented the fact of like turning me off of like cheap product like postcards, because you can't sell enough volume. And then if somebody's got a postcard in their hand that's like $2 or $4 versus a $30-$40 print, they're just going to buy the cheap thing, and you just cost yourself the sale. If they were inclined to want something from you, well, now they have this cheap thing in their hand, and they can get off cheap for it if they wanted that. So yeah, like I think trying out conventions when I have a broader inventory base, I think is definitely a thing. Like I want to have a good 20 prints, go 20 different prints before I go and do that.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, and I don't sell a lot of prints. Every once in a while, I'll sell a print, and the good thing about prints is that, and depending on where you print them and everything, there's the profit margin is pretty high on them, because like I can get prints printed at Cat Print for like $1 for 12 by 18, and then sell it for $20. So it's worth it. To sell. I don't have to sell all of them, because they, like you said, they don't all sell. I've got tons of them, and I used to do shows, but I kind of, even before COVID, I stopped kind of doing shows, just because, not that I made profit at the shows, but I just didn't. And this again goes back to the 80-20 rule. I was making profit, but when I looked at all the time that I was spending prepping and all that stuff, it just didn't. The numbers didn't add up. So.
Yeah.
Well, also too, wasn't it? You guys had, was it Steam Crow on before?
Yeah.
Like I think I remember them talking about how like their print sales like tanked at a certain point. Like it was strong for them for a while, but even at a certain point, they've saturated their market that was interested in prints from them, or whatever the case. I don't know, what the story is. But yeah, and even part of it is I would much rather figure out doing less sales without ever having to do conventions, actually, unless it's local. Like I live in the Philly area, so there's bound to be some stuff. But at the end of the day, like, you can invest like a week, a buttload of money, and it's an investment, it's a risk. So who knows whether that'll pan out.
So I think what you would clean up with at a convention is like, and this is where, I don't even know if this would fit your model, but it's like, if you were to go the resin route and then have like the kind of more expensive resin casts, but at the same time also have some resin casts of like smaller characters that are quicker to do and less labor intensive to like hand paint and stuff, and they're at like a lower price point. If you had stuff like that at a convention, I think you would clean up.
Yeah. Well, and also too, that way, like, that affords you the ability to price bracket. Yeah. So like, you can describe your pricing structure based off of the range of prices you have.
Yeah.
So if your lowest cost thing is $40, but your highest cost thing is $1,200, then your $40 thing looks like a good deal in comparison.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is like, if you have your really awesome, like custom art models, and then like right next to that, you have a little lower end, it's a resin cast of some of those art models, but it's like, the custom painted one that's a tier down, and so on, until you finally have like a little figure. So it's like, if you have someone who like loves your work, but they have like, $50 or $60, it's like they could actually walk away with like a custom sculpture. I've seen that kill at conventions. Like I know, like, I knew this girl back in the day. I can't remember her name anymore, but she used to make these little like Sculpey monsters that she would bake and then just sell at conventions, and she would clean and at comic conventions, just people would just, I mean, my wife and I bought two too, because they're just adorable, like crazy cool things. Keep in mind, that's like a really low price point, and it wouldn't be as like high of art as like the kind of stuff you do. But my point is, I think there is something about, especially for in-person, like that 3-dimensional like object, as opposed to just prints. Like prints would do well, but I think like for what you do, like having a resin cast kind of option, even online, I think is a really good idea, because there's people who love having that stuff around their house. And I mean, I just,
if you could print, I mean, if you could do these resin casts, I mean, it wouldn't even have to, you could have the kit, but I mean, I could even see you doing like magnets and things like that. Or
the problem with a product like a magnet is when you say magnet, somebody thinks of a little tchotchke that's like $10. So like, it's like a storytelling thing of like, this isn't a magnet, this is a piece of art. This is a sculpture. And it's the exact same thing. You literally could just embed a magnet and it function as that. But it's like the storytelling, like, and even like just that sort of thing of like, you know, like I have these little creatures. Actually, let me get one. Just one sec.
I'd love to see it.
Because I think that would do well. Like,
yeah. All right. Let's see what he's got.
All right. So like, you know, let me get to the camera.
Oh, I
like,
love
so
it.
this little critter, right? Getting in the camera. Right. Like, and so like this is just a little resin cast. Bugger. The camera.
Just keep it there. Don't move it. Don't move it. You moved it.
See, if you had those at a convention table, I just can't imagine those not moving very easily.
And like, so like, you know, once I did the casting of them, like I can make, and I did like 3 casts of them. So it like made 3 molds, so I can bang out 3 per shot. The stuff sets in like the resin sets in like you have 2 minutes to get it poured. Like I might go for the stuff that has a slightly longer open time just because it's stressful trying to get this mixed and poured in like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. But even so, like if I go up to the 7-minute set time, I can make 3 of these like basically every 15 minutes or so. And then it's a matter of just cleaning them up and painting them from there. So like I could make one of these like probably every half hour, you know?
Yeah. And then just price accordingly, like think about materials, time, and then, you know.
And then your idea is worth something.
Yeah,
you know?
of course. Yeah. But I mean,
so that
materials and time for like, to make sure you're not underselling.
So I launched them, which I sold a couple. So I only did 2 or not 2. I only did 10 in this colorway, and I launched them. I did like a little bit of a mailing list thing, and like I sold a couple of them, and I launched them at like a $40 or $45 price point. And then the idea was, hey, after a certain point, they're going up to $60. So like I was trying to create the time pressure thing. They're limited in this colorway. And like, I'm not saying that they're like a closed edition or a limited edition.
Yeah.
It's just, if I'm only supplying so many at a certain time, unless somebody's knocking off my work, you know, you can only get them as fast as I make them. So
yeah. And I like the idea of like limiting the colorway, because that creates the same kind of perceived value of and sense of like rarity, but also leaves you open to being able to like use the same mold if you need to. That's really cool. Sorry, I was going to get off topic and ask a bunch of questions about resin.
Well, I have a question. So, you had mentioned that the big part of what you do is the story behind it. Have you, and you also mentioned that prints are, and I think we can all agree that at one time prints were probably, you know, big sellers, but they kind of, and I don't know if some of that comes down to people just don't have enough room on their wall anymore because they have so many prints. But when that happens, a lot of people shift to, you know, like a book or something like that. I mean, you already know how to photograph these things for the prints. Have you ever considered doing a storybook, like take your characters and put them through a whole story, photograph it? I mean, you could even do print on demand and just print as you need, see if they sell. I don't know. Have you considered that, or have you tried it, or?
So yeah, in terms of that sort of 80-20 and investing the appropriate amount of time in the appropriate thing. So I've definitely like been playing around with world building as like I make stuff, I come up with like a little story behind it. But I really have to sit down and write, because you know, I have some concepts, like some themes I want to hit in the world and like things I want to tackle. And so I need to sit down and write these short stories and then do a thing where like I create maybe 4 to 6 images for the story, and then I collect enough of them, and then before you know it, I do have a book. But it's just a matter of putting in the time and the effort.
Yeah, because I just think you could scale it too, because I think once you have a story behind it, then not only a book, but it could be a collectible card game, you know, and you could reuse those same photographs, you know, that you use for the book or whatever, or even photographs that you already have, and do like a collectible card game or
board games or something like. Well, and also because the characters are posable, like I can get a lot of value and mileage out of the individual character. Like, it's a bit of, if somebody has a really fast style of working, like I envy them a little bit, because it is like a bit of a process to design and make these characters.
Yeah.
But I do have the upshot of like, okay, I have this thing and I can pose it however I need it. And like, I was even thinking, like, if I can grow my following big enough, and eventually going to Patreon, like, so this is, like you need like tens of thousands of people following you for Patreon to be a legitimate like option, really.
Yeah.
And sadly, I've even
and Ryan, I hate to cut you off real short, but I have, at least on YouTube, I have tens of thousands of people following me, and I don't have much of a Patreon following. So
you have to be like, I mean, by tens of thousands, I'm talking like 50K, 60K. And I've even like looked at channels that have 200, 300,000 subscribers or followings on Instagram or whatever. And like, they're only doing like maybe a few $100 a month, like if that. So, even that is like, you can see, this 300,000 subscriber channel. And then they have like maybe 12 people on their Patreon. Like it's crazy. But anyway, the thought is too, that I could then take these characters and create like little cardboard standees, or like a thing somebody could hang on their rear view mirror of their car, or even like standees that they could use like as customer characters for like role-playing games or like board games. Like, you can print this out and like use it for your home. Like if you're playing like King of Tokyo or whatever board game, you can use that to represent your character.
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
I just love the idea of a book, though, based on that, because, I think I've mentioned this to you before, Ryan, but it's like, like one of my favorite artists is Dave McKeon, and he does a lot of like mixed media and sculpture integrated with like, he's most known for doing like a bunch of the Sandman covers back.
I mean, I know a lot of his kids' books, Dave McKeon.
Yeah.
I'm definitely familiar.
Yeah, and like a lot of his kids' books are like this weird mix of like painting and sketching and then like sculpture, and it's a really cool thing. But he also did this book a long time ago that was like a painted book that also used a lot of actual sculpture called Mr. Punch.
Mr. Punch, I know Mr. Punch. I was going to bring that up if you didn't. So, yeah.
And it's just like that to me, like when I think about your aesthetic and like look, not that it's exactly Dave McKeon, but it feels like kind of like I could imagine you doing something similar to that and having this just like insanely cool book. And I think the upshot of having that story, I think this might be where Scott was driving at, but it's like if you have that story there and you get people invested in the story, then you're going to have people who really want the figures, like beyond just that's a cool figure. You're going to have people who relate to the figure. And so now they want a piece of it. Like they want a piece of that story.
And that would increase the price of your figures if it's actually one that's in the story, that was used.
Because I mean, it's nerdy, but I mean, this is really old. And it's plastic, but it's like I forget who was giving these away years ago. But this is back when Cartoon Books was putting out Bone. Like, so it was just it was a self-published comic. And I remember I went to like, I can't even remember where this came from, but I went to like 20 different stores and paid a ridiculous amount of money for just a little cheap, injection molded plastic of Bone, right? Because it was like, it's Bone. It's like it's a great figure.
He doesn't always wear gloves, does he?
No.
Or just because it's in black and white.
Long ago.
Well, and in part, why that's such a cherished thing for you is probably, in a way, it's a reflection of your identity, right? It's the same reason why people wear all this like Star Wars merch or whatever. It's because like it's a way of demarcating like this. I am this type of person by wearing or having this type of thing.
And I mean, I think it's that, and I think it's like when you sincerely like a character, it's like people are willing to, fork out cash. Like, I love Mr. Toad from Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Like, I will pay a lot more for a Mr. Toad statue than I would for any other like Disney related statue, because Mr. Toad's the shit, So, not that you're making Mr. Toad, but my point is like, I think what you're doing and like the way you frame your photos and stuff is so narrative and cool. and the stories you create with your art are really cool. I can't wait till it's a collected book, and I do think that's going to help the stuff. But I might just be putting you to make books because I'm a book nerd.
No, I love books, and books are they are an easy sell. Like when you can sell something to somebody for $20-$30 that's packed with value because there's so much imagery in it, plus you have the prose, which I would definitely go the prose route, because like I don't know, like sequential storytelling, it doesn't really, like, I enjoy it as an art form, but it wouldn't be the way I would probably go about.
Yeah, I was thinking more
I like stuff
picture
with
book.
a sequential element.
Or
like a picture
story,
or
picture. You know, it depends on the age group you want.
Brom did all those. Yeah, Brom did all those illustrated novellas where they're these 120, 140 page books, and they're also lushly illustrated. So basically, they're picture books for adults in a way. And
like the Squished Fairy books or something, you know.
Yeah, well, and yeah, like I don't know, like when I think about like the people that are likely to be into my stuff, like in a way I'm just kind of making stuff that I might, maybe some version of me might have been into it when I was like 13, 14, and just kind of going off of that.
I was thinking it could also be like, it could have story elements, but it could be almost like a log book. Like I've got a book by Tony DiTerlizzi. It's like Spiderwick Chronicles, but it's like it's basically like a log book, like how to find fairies, where to find them, and all that kind of stuff. And it's got his illustrations, got little notes. It looks like it's kind of all cut up, like it's actually something that somebody collected, all the information on the fairies and stuff like that. I could definitely see something like that with what you're doing.
Well, yeah, it takes on the feeling of like a bestiary, where it's like, they were like old texts, usually of a religious nature or whatever, that were kind of describing, chimera and like griffins, and like there's been tons of examples of those kinds of books. Because like sometimes too, I think about the idea of like, so whenever I make an image, like I come up with like snippets of text for it. So I kind of was thinking I could just, you get enough of those together and you just have these bits of prose interspersed with imagery. And it's similar to like how role-playing game books, like they'll have the bits where it's like people in the world talking about the thing that's in it, so maybe it doesn't have the stat block or whatever, but like so I rounded out more with story as opposed to like game mechanics sort of stuff. But also being a bit of a role-playing game nerd, I could see a supplementary content of like, oh, this is how you put it in your Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game or something like that.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's hugely scalable, but it's like anything else, you got to build the audience. I was talking to my son's developing a game too, and I said, you gotta start sharing some of this stuff and start building an audience now, But
go ahead, Scott.
No,
I was just gonna say, like, everybody that the model I've seen work and be repeated over and over and over again. It's the OG webcomics model. It's you make the thing, you share it out in public, you show people progress as it's going. Like maybe you get a few things done ahead of time so you're happy with the quality and you curate and share it how you want to. But the whole idea is you're not just presenting a whole thing or a thing whole cloth to the audience that didn't even know you exist or where to find you.
Yeah.
You've been slowly drip feeding this whole thing to people, and like maybe even the entire project, because if they're seeing it in a bunch of like little 1080 by 1080 Instagram squares, like that's not satisfying when you could have it in a whole book to have on your desk or whatever. So you could share the whole project as you're building it, and eventually hey, here's the thing that you've really liked, that you've been following me for the last 16 months over. Well, guess what? You can back it for Kickstarter, and in another like year from then, you'll have it in your hands. So yeah, like it's the webcomics model. Like I've seen it work so well for like illustrators and things like that too.
And I think like at the end of the day, like you just got to focus on making good work. And so in that case, like as long as it's a book that's good, because I think the nightmare scenario is like, let's say you do the webcomics model. Scott and I have talked about this too with like YouTube, where it's like, I think Scott could easily do certain things with his YouTube channel that would definitely gain a crap load of subscribers, but he would go to sleep at night and feel like he wanted to kill himself.
I mean, going back to the topic, I mean, I can look at the videos that make the most that do the most. I mean, there's just a handful of videos that bring in the most money, and one of them is
your 80/20
how to make stickers book, which I am working on, and that's a video I don't mind doing more of that kind of content, but it's difficult to put together, and I'm kind of working on that. But then there's other ones that there are just certain things that do well that I just don't want my channel to become that. I mean, I guess it could be profitable. So I'm giving up being a huge YouTube star again. Well, I don't know if that'll happen, but just the possibility of that, because a lot of that stuff I just don't want to do, but
yeah. And I think it depends, right? Because that could be great if, let's say like, your best video or whatever on your channel is like doing a sketchbook thing, and you love sketching, and that's kind of your jam.
Yeah.
Like, why the hell not have that be your channel, right? Like if that's something you love. But if it's like a tutorial video and you hate doing tutorials, and if you built your tutorial channel, it would do excellently. It's like, I don't know if it depends, right? That's where it's like you want to balance. Like for me, I came to this realization years ago where I was doing freelance work for so long that I was like, I kind of don't care what I'm drawing, like to pay the rent. Like I just stopped caring, in the sense of like, I can make good art and get paid for it, but it's like the constant hunt for more clients, and this constant like just feeling of inflexibility, even in years where you're having really wild success. I was like, I would rather have just like a steady paycheck and be a paid hand than like be this paid hand who's like mailing people like, pay me. Like I got really sick of it. So, but I did that. It's like that exchange where it's like, you kind of have to like balance like what's profitable, like what's most profitable to you. And for me, like part of why that was more profitable to kind of take like an in-house thing doing that was comics, was because I realized like I was constantly on this hunt for work and like making money and stuff doing art and like getting my style out there and getting more clients. And I realized like my comics were just not getting done. Like they were just sitting and getting shelved because I had to take the work. And so it like, the point being, if I felt like taking the work was selling my soul, then I probably wouldn't be able to take that work. You know what I mean? If I felt like there's certain comics, I think all of us, or certain art pieces we could write that would probably have more of a market than some of the stuff we're doing. But I don't know if that fits like our soul, as creators. Like, anyhow, I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess my point is, yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. Like even like talking about this sort of freelance life, like I don't know, like I know plenty of people again that like who are freelancers that are basically like being Facebook friends with them or whatever. Like a lot of them are, I've seen plenty of people living hand to mouth. Like unless you're this, like there's a certain strata of people that are sought after for what they do. And then there's sort of everybody else who's just like a job to fill a role. And it just, I don't know, like it seems like because every year another crop of art students are churned out, you have people that like can afford to work for a third or a quarter of the rates, like in countries where that money goes far for them. But here, like, it would get you by a couple of weeks. And so like, I don't even know, like, if being a freelancer is much of a safe bet. Like you may as well, because I think a lot of people I've come across, like, it seems like they work a day job in a studio or some sort of like collaborative thing. and they moonlight in freelancing, but it wouldn't be enough for them to sustain themselves.
So actually, I'm going to totally disagree in a weird way, and maybe Scott will back me up on this, but I actually think most in-house people should freelance for like a really long time. Because there's stuff you learn doing freelance that like you just can't compete with in-house. Like the skills that you have to acquire to freelance and run your own business is like, it's monumentally, it's like a different game than like kind of the safe bubble of in-house.
And is it worth it?
Healthy because it makes you better in-house. And I think Scott might back me up on this, but it's like, it actually makes you a better in-house person because you realize like, first off, your in-house gig, like the benefits, the vacation time, like all of the benefits, right? It's all illusion. Like you're just as safe in-house as you are out of house, right? Like, and also it makes you appreciate the benefits, but not only that, you know how to hustle. So like during the pandemic, when things started getting shaky and getting a little crazy, and like even my in-house position got a little scary for a little bit, it's like I'm a little less scared because it's like I've been a cowboy before. I'm not afraid to like go out there with my 6 guns and like and seek work because I've done it. Like I know how to hunt. So I guess my point is, I'm rambling, but I'm just saying I do think there's a huge amount of value to like knowing how to hunt, knowing your potential, and knowing that you can. But I agree with you, Ryan, in the sense of like there's a ton of people who like work in-house and think they could freelance, and the second they're out there in the freelance world, they get buried alive.
But there's enough of them that are like actually doing freelance on their nights and weekends, just because it's interesting to them.
Yeah.
But because the rates in like say the role playing game industry, like like that sort of market, the rates are so awful that you need your day job and then like do that. It's like a luxury thing that you get to do that just for fun.
No. Like I have one of the most talented people I know started doing Wizards of the Coast cards, which is like this sought after thing for some reason. I don't understand why. But it's like they're crazy in the expectations of the art because every digital painter on the planet who wants to be in Spectrum is like chasing after Wizards of the Coast, and they'll have you do like 50 revisions on paintings and like highly rendered paintings, and you'll get like $50 at the end. And if you do the math, it's like you're getting paid less than you would at like a McDonald's, Well,
so. I mean, like I think if you get like like a marquee card and like say a Magic the Gathering set or something like that, like the interiors for Dungeons and Dragons probably not great. But if you're doing like a Magic the Gathering card, like I think it's like you might be in the $2-3 grand range or something like that from things I've heard. But also all the revisions, there's lots of lead time and waiting on all that stuff to get any feedback from the art director. And there's only less than 200 cards released in most sets, so only a limited number of people are getting those jobs.
Yeah. Well, and the catch is like regardless of like what the pay scale is, there's more lucrative industries and stuff, and then there's things like I think it's smart to do stuff like what Scott's doing now, where he's like building his own brand and his own thing. Because like at the end of the day, like, like if you have a killer client, like you're at the top of the world, like doing stuff for a client, you're still kind of relying on that client. The second that client drops off, unless you've built like an effective brand on your own, like you're kind of screwed. So, but my only point about like freelance is I know a ton of people who work in-house who have never worked freelance, or they moonlight at freelance. And honestly, they should just take the crazy jump and just do freelance, because they're so filled with fear and like in-house culture that it kind of it stifles them creatively. On the adverse, I know a bunch of people who are freelance and are like 6 guns shooting, like doing the freelance stuff, and they should be in house. It's like, but I do think, I do think, yeah, like I'm an advocate for like, hey, do whatever you need to do to make a living as an artist, and then on top of that, like make cool stuff.
Yeah,
but
well, I mean, you should never place bets that you can't afford the downside if it doesn't work out. Basically, you know, you always have to protect the downside.
Yeah, everything's a bet. And my only point is, like I did 15 years as a freelancer, and because of I will never, like, I got burnt out on it and I got sick of the whole hustle, but I will never regret it. Like, in the sense of like, you know, when economic uncertainty is happening and all my friends who've been like in-house people for their lives are like freaking out, I'm kind of a little more calm because I'm like, I know the game. Like,
I've been through the crucible.
Yeah, and also it's like you see your capacity when there's no floor. There's something beautiful about, like, when I jumped into freelance, and this is going to go against a lot of advice people give, but when I went into freelance, like, I didn't wait till I had like this whole backup of savings and stuff like that. I just literally got so fed up with like in-house culture that I flipped off my art director and I left. And I just let there be no floor. And I didn't have, like, you know, someone to support me. I didn't have like a backup. So I literally put myself in a crucible where I, like, if I need to eat next week, I need to make art, and I need to figure out a way to make art and eat. And I have to say, like, that experience is so valuable, because that is like, when you do it and then you see you can, and I'm not saying it works for everybody, but I'm just saying, like, when you can hustle and make it work, it gives you a certain sense of confidence. And then it also builds your work, because if your work is weak and can't get clients, you start adapting your work very quickly because you're hungry. You know, like, you're literally hungry. And so to me, like, even lately, like the last year and a half, like, seeing Scott build this, like, crazy amount of work for Amazon products, and try different hustles, and, like, you know, sell digital products and stuff like that. Like, that is inspiring. And I think that's what artists should do. Like, it's really cool. And I don't know if that could happen if he was in the bubble of like a workplace. I don't know if that makes sense. But at the same time, I like the bubble of a workplace, but I do think it's just so valuable. Like, if an artist has wanted to freelance and go full-time freelance and hasn't, I almost feel like you're going to be really bitter wherever you work until you go freelance, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't think you need to seek out client work. I think there's, you know, like there's something to be said for working whatever bullshit job you need to sustain yourself, and then like skipping over the whole freelance thing and just make digital products and like make books, make whatever, and make yourself the client. Because I think the rates that I've seen around places are just gross. Like, you're better off not taking those jobs, because you can't turn them around fast enough for it to be worth you doing it in the first place. There's so many things you see on Craigslist or like Indeed postings for things. I'm just like, are you kidding me? I could go work at Aldi and stock shelves for like $1 or $2 less than what this job is paying, you know?
That I agree with. Like, by what I was saying about freelance, I wasn't saying go freelance for nothing. like the worst thing I ever see when people, and honestly, I think the people who flood the market and underprice are people who worked in the bubble, like, or are moonlighting, right? But it's like, yeah, if you're going to work for a client where you could make more doing McDonald's, like, go do McDonald's and then do your own stuff. Like, literally, like, there's no shame in that. If you can make more like painting a wall than you can like painting a whole illustration, paint the wall.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it back to the 80-20 rule.
80-20,
I mean, you can spend 80% of your time working on these, low paying jobs.
Yeah.
You could have 80 low paying jobs.
Yeah.
And they would probably get you 10% of your income. Whereas if you spent that time on the high paying job, if you could just find 20 high paying jobs,
Yes.
it's going to give you that 80% return. It's going to be way more profitable. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing. I mean, it's easier said than done, but I've heard, if you've watched any like Christo's content or whatever, where, he's given that advice where just get, you've got this, there was this guy on Fiverr or whatever, and he was like, okay, you're spending all this time working on these rinky-dink jobs.
Yeah.
Just go to each one of them and say, look, I enjoy working with you, but I can't continue to do this. I mean, my work has more value than that. So here's the deal. I'm raising my price like however many percent, I forget. It was a pretty big, a huge markup from what they were used to paying. Yeah. And the one guy he had given this advice to said he lost probably about 90% of his clients, but the ones that stayed on made up for all those that dropped off.
Yeah, so. I experienced that a lot doing t-shirts too, where it's like when I was mainly freelance, like my main income was t-shirts, but there was this whole different t-shirt game that I never dipped into, and you could get plenty of work, but just like, t-shirts, it's all flat rate usually, and so when you're doing like flat rate art, there's a certain client that's going to pay like a very low flat rate, and you could sell designs, where they want exclusive rights and stuff to your designs for like all day. You could be busy like every hour of the day just selling, and be making less than you'd make at a minimum wage job. Yeah. And so it didn't take me very long to like realize like I would state the price. Like the client would like, be like, oh, I've got this. And I'd be like, look somewhere else. I'd even turn them to people who like I knew undercharged. I'd be like, go work with that guy. Like, because the thing was, if I got the one client who paid what I was worth, it made up for like 20 of those clients. So it's like all I need is that one. I don't need to hunt the 20. So it was the 80-20 thing, totally, for sure.
Well, and like kind of going back to the whole discussion of even earlier when we were talking about merchandise, like that's why like I don't understand selling, say, like single individual, like say a $5 or $6 sticker or something like that, which is a lot for a sticker, but still it's like that's what it is. And the time a person spends packaging and addressing that envelope, like I just can't see that being worth it. Like, so like the same thing with 80-20, like if I have to sell 10 of something to be equal like one higher ticket item, I'll just focus on trying to create the higher ticket item that people want to buy from me. And the same thing too with like that little sculpture. I could theoretically sell it for a quarter of what I like go to price it for, whatever. But chances are I'm probably not going to find 4x the number of buyers. So ultimately I'll end up making less because you're not Walmart. You're not a volume business. So you have to be boutique.
But you could sort of in a way partner with a volume business the same way that what I'm trying to do with Amazon. So, I mean, I watch a lot of content on people who are selling, they're taking whatever t-shirts or whatever they designed for the t-shirts that they designed for, merch by Amazon, and then they're going over to Redbubble, or they're putting out content for Redbubble because it's the barrier of entry is nothing. I mean, anyone can go on Redbubble, and of course there's a lot of competition, a lot of other people doing it. But one of the things that they were like, and I've sold stuff on Redbubble, and kind of like what you were saying, Ryan, I was like, well, I don't want to sell stickers because it's really not worth it. But what I found was stickers sell on Redbubble, and if you're not the one, you said, it's not worth it you to dress the envelope and to ship a sticker. But if you're not the one having to do that, then so now I got to go back on my Redbubble and start making more stickers and things like that. That's on the list of things to do. But if you can get to a point where you don't have to do that, same thing with digital product. I mean, I was very. It took. I mean, I was big on physical products, and now it's kind of like, and I don't want to say this if people want to buy a physical product from me, because I appreciate it. But when I get an order, the first thing that clicks on my mind is, I hope this is digital. And I look if it's digital, because it's a higher profit margin if I've already created. I mean, it takes a long time to create these digital products, but if it sells, I don't have to worry about, I don't have to ship it out. I don't have to do any of that stuff. And it's usually, there's usually the profit margin is larger once you finish the product.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I mean, that's the thing too, with like another 80-20 related thing, like on the front end. So like, the entire idea of passive income is myth. It's a complete myth, because like really it takes, hours and hours to develop that passive income product. And then maybe you get paid back going on years later if it's a product that is evergreen or whatever. But that's only if it sells and you either wasted a lot of time, or you've created a banger of a product that you can make money for, for years to come. And it's just a gamble. And another thing too is like, why not list, if all the different platforms are suitable for like a digital product that you have, why not list it on literally every single one of them?
that's what I do. Yeah.
But only direct traffic to the things that are of value to you, like to your website or whatever.
Yeah. And I don't promote any, other than sometimes I'll promote with one of my, the biggest one, the one that I get the most, probably the most return from, is Design Cuts, that marketplace, because I have a really good working relationship and I've worked on exclusive products with them and everything, and they're constantly promoting it. But that's the thing, like if I'm going to promote one of my products, I'm going to promote it to my own website, because these other marketplaces, if they want to, they have the wherewithal to promote that. So like say the biggest one is probably Creative Market, and I sell stuff on Creative Market, but not as much as I do like on the Design Cuts, because they actually I have a relationship with them and they promote it and stuff like that. So but it doesn't hurt to have my stuff also on some of these other ones, and some of them are like even the smaller ones, because it all kind of adds up. But in regards to digital products, I mean, I've got a number of digital products, but again, it's about 2 out of the, say if I've got 10 digital products, it's about 2 of them that make the majority of my sales. So that's why you want to focus on creating more products like that. That's why I kind of doubled down on the comic book products, digital products.
I mean, go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
No. Ryan, you go.
Oh, okay. The other thing too, I would say about having your stuff listed like everywhere, is every single one of these websites is a search engine. Like you put things into a search bar. So if you have the right keywords that not that many other people are competing with you against, then you are the de facto seller of that product category on that website.
Yep.
Exactly.
So you're like owning your, and also every time you list on those sites, you're upping the SEO for your own personal website, which is kind of awesome. Nice little byproduct. The one thing I wanted to say about the smaller products too, like the magnets, what you call tchotchkes, I think you can't undervalue those things, because this goes totally into the 80-20 and kind of what we started this with, which was kind of like where Scott was talking about valuing his shirts at cost, right? And like, why is Scott, like, what would you call that in business where you sell something at cost for no profit?
Loss leader. It's a loss leader.
It's a loss leader. And a lot of the time, like if you're at a convention, and it's a smart thing sometimes, don't get me wrong, like you don't want your loss leader to compete with your main sale, but it might not hurt to have postcards that function as a loss leader to get people interested in spending more money at your booth.
That's what I do to build my mailing list, is the Comic Maker Starter Kit, which is
exactly
a scaled down version of the Comic Maker Toolkit. But and I specifically designed them so there's something you can get in the starter kit that you can't get in the toolkit, and there's a lot of things in the toolkit that aren't in the starter kit. So even if you have the toolkit, you can still get the starter kit and sign up for the mailing list and everything. But there's people that get the starter kit, and that it doesn't devalue the toolkit, because they're like, oh, I want more of this. And the Comic Maker Toolkit is that's my best seller by a long shot.
But I think probably partially because you did the starter kit. Like I really do think it's partially that, because once people dip their fingers in there and start seeing like, oh, this isn't like some joke pack. It's like there's custom fonts, there's all this cool stuff. Like I want that bigger kit, you know?
It's a sales funnel. Like you're whetting the appetite at the larger end. Like you have the freebie, and then if you're proving the value of that, then maybe that next thing you have. Now, as far as like the sort of like loss leader product at a convention, I don't know. If you're traveling for a convention, you're in days when people travel to things. You're in for a grand. You know, like you're in for the better part of a grand to get yourself there. Yeah. So anything to dilute your chance of making, I would say, I say you want to make like 40. You want to average $40-$60 a transaction. Well, and like also like see comics to me, like I can't understand the math, like because even the trade paperback is it's like such a low ticket item that like for me that's like, whoa, how you gotta sell a lot of these things to make your money back.
The game in comics is graphic novels, like you know, like you are pretty much like floppies are a hard thing to make a profit off of, because even if you're doing an offset, right, you're spending at minimum, let's say you get like a killer deal and you order like a giant quantity, you're spending probably about like 50 cents an issue, right? Like that's pretty good. Like that would be a great deal. And you know, what are you going to be able to sell your indie comic for? A lot of the time what people are selling like a floppy for is maybe at most they're making like an 1/8 to a 16th of the profit. Whereas like for a t-shirt, right, you spend $2 on a t-shirt, you sell it for $20. You've just like, I mean, like the margins on that are insane, right?
If you print them yourself, don't
do t-shirts for conventions, because then you have to get into prediction of sizing. I hate it.
But even like Amazon, so like I said, I mean, it costs to do a t-shirt on Amazon, it's about, like I said, $13.50 is what, you know, that's what I'm selling those for.
Oh yeah. Like for on demand, but like if you screen print a shirt, right, you can get like a bulk amount of shirts for like $2.
Right, but you have to consider you got to factor in your time and your labor and all that stuff. So it's
more. My point is like for a retailer or for somebody boothing at a convention, like you could, in theory, put in about $3 to $4 a shirt, and you're going to make like a massive return on profit. Like so like if you're doing on-demand shirts, it's a whole different game, right? Like you're not making a mass profit margin. But my point is like there's certain things where it makes sense, where like a print is perfect, because a print, you're like Scott was talking about, it's like cat print. You put in like maybe $2 and then you can sell it for like $18-$20. That's insane. Like that's a really good profit margin. But with a floppy comic, it's like most people are selling it for a loss or for breaking even, or maybe they make like 10 cents an issue. So you have to like, I mean, to do the math to make money on a floppy, I thought about it because I was originally going to run 2 stories as floppies, and that's part of why I decided to just have patience and wait for the trade, because I realized like the floppies were like cool for me, but they didn't, like, it was like ego cool, but like I didn't really see the potential of like being able to make a booth at a convention, you know?
Yeah. My defense of the floppies is go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead with the floppy thought, because otherwise I'm leaving that thought a little bit.
My defense of the floppies, the reason why I do them is because it's a good benchmark. Because unlike Josh, I'd never finish that book if I didn't have those benchmarks. And in the middle of those benchmarks, I can run a Kickstarter, and on a Kickstarter, you can sell a floppy for $20 with you know, and there's extras and things and perks because people are, so I can go to Kickstarter, I can have my run, even though it's print on demand, I can have that all that all paid for. So now when I sell a book, it doesn't cost me anything. I've got a stock of books that when people order them, I can sell them, and it didn't cost me anything to print them. So I'm still losing money because the amount of time it took me to create the comic is never going to make that profitable.
Well, you're gonna lose money doing indie comics anyway, and I'm glad that people run floppies. But my point is, if you're going to a convention with just floppies, and somebody in the chats was asking what a floppy is, it's just
single comic.
The floppy is a 24 to 32 page comic book that's saddle stitched, right? Like your traditional comic book.
Yeah, traditional
single issue, your basic single issue comic book.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm glad there are floppy comics, and I'm glad they exist. But I just, like, for myself, like Ryan was saying about, like, thinking about resin casts and, like, maybe I could price them lower or whatever. For me, that was a no-go kind of thing, where I was like, just for what I'd have to put into it and what I'd get back, it's like not as much return as I would get on, say, like a graphic novel. Even through a publisher, I can get it at like 50% off. And so as long as I'm not selling it to like a retailer, you know, I'm making at least twice as much as I spent, you know, like, which you know, so I can understand like the pricing thing, Ryan, that you were talking about, where it's like, there is a certain point where, you know, like if it's a loss leader to promote yourself for work, right? Like, then that's why like doing postcard giveaways and stuff like that is worthwhile. But yeah.
So like some of the best wisdom that I've gotten on some of this sort of stuff, partly from doing my own things that just didn't work out and, like, you know, expose myself to some risk, and then also just from watching people that are smarter than me, is like, don't go after a market that isn't there. Like, first see what, if you can't get somebody that buys something from a print on demand, chances are you're probably not going to get somebody to buy that thing from you either. So don't invest hundreds of dollars on a thing. Like I spent a few $100 on prints that I have a big box of prints that could get damaged, could get dinged up, and then they're valueless, or I have to sell them, you know, at a steep markdown to just recoup the cost on that. And the other bit of wisdom I heard is kind of like, start at a 10x markup and then walk your way back to what the market will bear on that item. Yeah. So like you might get eventually to like 4 or 5x the cost of materials or whatever, or costs in the thing. But like, could somebody pay 10x for it? Is that a reasonable thing? Do people sell that thing for that amount? If they do, then you've got a banger of a product. But if not, then you figure out what people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah. Like I said,
and sometimes that might not be worth it. Sorry,
like
go ahead.
Or even more than, I mean, like I said, my prints are, you know, I can get them printed, and I granted I get a lot of discounts from Cat Print because I send them a ton of customers from one video that I have this, you know, but anyway, regardless of that, so I can get prints done pretty cheap, and I can turn around and sell them for $20. I actually, on Etsy, because of their free shipping that they want to give, I sell them for $25 on Etsy to make up for that shipping. So I mean, I make a good profit on prints. I just don't sell them enough of them, but I sell enough of them that I've made my money back from any print run that I've done, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Scott or Josh.
I like what you're touching on, Scott, though, because it also highlights the importance of like more than just the profit margin, the volume. So it's like a good example is like, you know, I have prints that like much like Scott was describing, like, you know, they're really cool and there's a huge markup, and when it sells, it's a really good profit for me. But for like the last like 15 years, I've gotten a monthly check for like a stupid t-shirt that I designed 10 years or 15 years ago that I don't have to touch, right? And it was on the right platform, and I get a very small percentage of, but it's like every month of the year I make money off that thing, and I haven't marketed it, I haven't touched it, and it still pays. And it's like, you know, so which would I prefer, like the giant profit margin where it's selling less volume, or the volume where like 15 years later totally buries whatever like giant profit margin thing I've ever had, you know? So I think like what Scott's talking about is pretty on point too, where it's like there's different angles of it where it's like, you know, it's almost like you could sell a Rolls Royce at a car dealership, but like if you look at the numbers, like what's making more profit? Is it the Rolls Royce dealership or the Honda dealership?
The Hyundai Accent that's like $15,000 that they're selling, you know, tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, it gets to the thing of like, do you think you can be the Walmart of that thing, or do you think that like you're going to be the boutique gallery seller and kind of choosing a position and like seeing where that bears out? I mean, personally, like I just think it's a lot of work to be the Walmart seller. And
agreed.
Is your stuff going to be that appealing to that many people? And like, so you have to have that very like a lot of people get it and are instantly into it right away. Or like, I just think that like, you know, what I'm doing is like so niche and like individualized that like, it just wouldn't be a sensible play for me to make.
But Ryan, I think where your game's at is more in a different market than like the mass sales market. Like I think of your work as yours is like you need to market on scarcity, right? And value. like
and like in niche. I mean, like you just said the niche down. I mean, that's where you can, because if not everyone is doing it, or if it's not that easy to find, like if you're just doing, okay, I'm just doing logo designs and it's just like every other logo designs, then you got to compete with all those people. But if you have something about the style of logo you do that may be different, or you concentrate on a particular discipline or a particular niche, for lack of a better word, that not everyone's doing, that's where the value comes in, you know.
I mean, all pricing is made up, and like it's just a matter of being able to convince other people that to them and to yourself that your thing is worth that, and you can only do that by comparing and contrasting what's available, you know. But all money is fake, basically. What's that?
Some of that's how you present too, like you know, tying into like what we were talking about with pricing. Like Scott and I have both talked about this like a million times, but it's like one of the saddest things to see with like a new illustrator is when they undervalue themselves with pricing. And it's like, they'll do an illustration for like $100. It's like a full page spread for a magazine. And it's like, they have no idea they're being completely raked over the coals, like for what they're getting paid for that thing. Like,
I mean,
that's nowhere near what you should value yourself at. And I could look at that artist's work and tell them you should value yourself more and charge more, and they'll still charge it because they're new. And it's heartbreaking because it's how they market themselves. Like they can literally put their foot down, they'll lose that $100 job, and then like 10 weeks later, they'll get a $2,000 spread for a magazine that'll make worthwhile the things that they shot down, like every single $100 magazine spread, you know. But they'll never get to the $2,000 magazine spread till they say F you to the $100. Because I'm an art director, right? And it's like I price shit, and I'm smart, and I value art, but at the same time, I'm in this compromised position where my job is also to prop up my business that I work for. And so if I can hire you, and this is actually a message for like any illustrator out there, if I can hire you for $25 to do a great illustration, I'm going to pay that. You're not going to get more than that. Like, and that's not me. Like, that's just literally brutal capitalism and the system we live in. But if you value yourself only at $25 an hour, understand when I come at you and I'm quoting for a job and you tell me to quote first because you're that naive and you're not quoting first, I'm going to tell you $20. I'm going to tell you $5. I'll tell you $1 because I have to back up the interests of profit, right? And it sucks, but that's business. So if you come at me with a quote first, instead of me coming at you with a quote, you're going to get paid better.
right? And if you value yourself higher, you're going to get higher value work. It's just the way it works, you know?
So a couple of thoughts on that. There's like, there is the adage in negotiations that he who speaks first loses.
Yes.
So like, yeah, you could hear somebody out and like, no, and then come up with a quote that's like 10 times that amount. But I was, I was listening to an interview with this guy that used to do movie posters back in the day. And so like decades ago, basically. And he basically came to the conclusion that it's an unviable market anymore, because he would see these, fresh out of school students come in and work on movie poster comps for like $50, when meanwhile that was he knew it was a $3,000 job, and like he saw the artist's work and they were worth it. But unfortunately, between like it was ahead of Photoshop being a thing, but also just like every year art students are being churned out, so the market drug down. Like Drew Struzan doesn't do movie posters anymore, and like he was the king of movie posters.
Yeah, but that was in an era where like Drew Struzan, like early on, was like not respected, right? And they'd pay him
made money.
Like $10,000 for a poster, and it's like that is not like those kind of rates don't exist anymore, you know.
Mm-mm.
But it's like that was crap pay back then, you know. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to try to get across to like people who are kind of new at it, because it's like, let's say you're coming from a job where you're not even making like $14 an hour or something, right? Like you're making a little over $10 an hour. It's like if you tell somebody who's making that much that when they price art, they should be charging, $50, $60 an hour minimum, their eyes get wide. Like, that's insane. And it's like, that's not like, it's not what they think it is. And then they'll get into it and kind of do it for like $5 an hour and realize like after years of doing it, like they need to charge $50 to $60 an hour minimum. And if they're not charging 50 to 60 minimum, then like do what Scott's doing, where you're building your own products and your own brands, because like it's just, it can be a hideous thing. And that's the 80-20 thing too, where it's like, in pricing, right? Like, it's like you want to take, like, who are the 20% of clients you want? That's who you need to chase,
Replicate them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Or like the 20% of like, of profit you want. Like, that's the way to go. So Ryan, I actually think like the scarcity, the limited, like going the art route is actually a good idea. And it actually fits the work you're doing, because like, I've seen people who make like models on Etsy and like do resin casts on Etsy. And even that little, monster you showed us is a million times cooler than most like faux sculptors, like.
Are you on Etsy, Ryan?
I actually decided to not be there because I just feel like it's a race to the bottom. Like, like so many things, like I almost feel like getting the taint of Etsy on, like, if you have print on demand stuff, it makes a lot of sense, I think, in the bulk of your product. And if I were to do stuff that is like either print on demand, like you can go in with, there are some like printing companies and stuff that will interface with Etsy. I could see doing that. I could see doing digital products, but I don't think I would do any like physical products through Etsy, just because like it just seems like they're always.
I was going to just say that's weird, because that's really what they were, and they've become, since they started to do the partnerships with the digital. I mean, they're making more money now, but I think it's just I think it's pretty much wrecked their whole brand, really.
They've gone away from handmade. They've got drop shippers. They got people flipping stuff on Alibaba, and Wish nonsense or whatever. And like, it's like they're diluting their brand it's because they have venture capital money, I think they're publicly traded now. So like they have to make that money, and they're indebted to somebody somewhere. So that's on them. But yeah, with the free shipping, it just seems like every time you hear about things with Etsy, like every so often the position of a seller has gotten worse and worse every so often.
Yeah, I'm on there, but I get sales every once in a while, but I don't focus on it,
Yeah.
but like you said, I may, eventually what I want to do is create just a generic store for t-shirts that once I start getting a number of t-shirts on Amazon, I can move that over to Etsy. But it's sad because it's not handmade anymore. But at least with mine, I can say that I designed the t-shirts myself.
I mean, your comic maker toolkit stuff that could go on there too. Like,
I can't sell it on Etsy because their download limits are so low. I mean, those are pretty huge files for the stuff I create. There's just, I mean, there are workarounds that I could do, I think, but yeah, I could look into it, but yeah, it's just, typically what they're selling is like, and I think what people are used to paying is like $3 for like an SVG file or something. They're not looking for I don't even think the buyers on Etsy understand what that type of thing is, because I think it's foreign to them. Whereas if you go on a Creative Market or Design Cuts, they understand what that is, what these products are, that they're not clip art. They're actually, a kit or tools to help you.
So Scott, what you need to do is just make like a dumbed down version of your product that
I mean, there's so many things.
Effectively isn't as intuitive, but it works on like Microsoft Word. And then you put it on Etsy and it'll sell like gangbusters. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's just a matter of time and going back to 80-20. What do you focus on? What's going to get the most? I mean, I could do that and make maybe I could make a lot of, I don't know, there's
not worth it.
You just got to evaluate everything. Like, I mean, back to topic. I mean, with me, I mean, I was, for the past, I don't know how many months I've been heavily focusing on KDP, and I haven't stopped that, but I had to realize that it's maybe not growing as fast as I can.
Yeah.
I'm still focused. I still have a goal to publish, at least $50 a month. But I realized that, 80% of what would the profitability was coming from the digital products, and I hadn't put out a digital product. So right now I'm working on a new digital product, while still at least keeping that, the thing rolling with the KDP. So I'm not totally backing off of it, but I got to realize that the money, at least right now, is coming from the digital product. So that's why I'm focusing more on that. Whereas before I'm like, I just got to build KDP, so.
Yeah. Another avenue to maybe consider too is, so like creating courses on, say, like a Skillshare or whatever. Like you could create like, an extra few minutes of content or whatever on your YouTube videos that goes just a little bit deeper. And then like you could have this whole course thing of like, and then you could advertise there, because they pay way better rates on the Skillshare and different, educational platforms like that, like a Gumroad or this or that might be a thing where your YouTube videos become the gateway to selling, like more in-depth tutelage, not as quite as good or as in-depth as your one-on-one mentorship or your group mentorship sort of stuff that you're also thinking about having in the wings.
Yeah.
But like, that could be another like entry-level product that you could also use to promote your mentorship.
Yeah, and that definitely is something that I want to get into too. There's again, there's a lot of setup with that and everything, but yeah, I want to get into that. I was, if the one-on-one was a little more successful, more people were finding it, that would probably help build that a little better. But it is, I mean, it's the Making Comics 101 is something that I can point to. I can send people kind of proof of concept. It's kind of that I know what I'm talking about. So I'm definitely going to use that to hopefully, build something. That's what I'm trying to do with the mentorship, but that's infant stages right now. So we'll see where that goes. But I mean, you commented on that, saying you had some good ideas about how to handle that too. So it's taking all these things into consideration and figuring what's what is that, what do I focus on?
What plates you spin at what time?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's what we're talking about, evaluating what works and what doesn't, and then focusing more on what works. So, it's
a good skill to build, because like early in freelance, I remember when I first started, I was like, I wanted to do skateboard art because I loved Santa Cruz decks. And I was just like, it was one of the biggest influences on my illustration early on was like Santa Cruz decks.
I love
So,
the glow dot poser deck. That was so sweet. I
Yes.
still love that.
So I was like, when I got into freelance, I was like, if I could just get skateboard decks, and that was like my like mission number one. And then I got some skateboard decks, and it was like, holy shit! Like the pay was terrible for skateboard decks. It was like the worst. And then I started looking into it, and like action sports as an industry are just like notoriously the worst pay. So I was like, okay, well, comics, like I love comics, right? And Scott laughs, and there's a reason Scott's laughing, because if you want to make a living as a freelance illustrator, do not do comics.
Unless you're doing comics for product, like the comics that go into toys, or the comics that are to advertise, like a nonprofit organization that they give, that advertising agencies are the ones paying your bill, not the comic book company.
It's very hard to make comics work, even if you're like part-time for like one of the big two. The only people I've known who've made it work, like made it full-time for the big two, and even the full-time salary when you get like on a contract with the big two is not what you'd expect. So the point being, like, it's like important to kind of gear and be like, what's your objective, right? And like, I do think that's really important for people, because it not only touches on like, what do you need to eat and keep a roof over your head, which we all have to worry about, right? But it also comes to like philosophical questions of like, what do you want to sell? What do you want to sell for? And like, what do you want to make outside of like the roof over your head stuff? And like, I think those are really valuable things to like consider when you're getting into art.
I think the entirety of like the commercial art industry is kind of, the closer something is to somebody's passions, the less likely it's going to pay well. The closer the thing is to capital, as in capitalism, like pharma, advertising, things like that, is the better it's going to be paying. And like that's if you need to exist as a human being under the conditions that we live under, you have to take that into account, or just have a day job and do your stuff on night and weekends.
Like Scott will attest to this too, but it's like one of the coolest things as an artist, like, because this can sound like a downer where it's like you're gonna have to sell out and stuff like that. It's like, it's been about 20 years since I've had to do a job where I didn't have to like just draw or design stuff. And that's been like that, like, I don't know how, and I think Scott can attest to this too, but it's like we've cheated the system somehow. Every day you can exist, and I can't reiterate this enough, every day you can exist as a creative, and that's what feeds you. Hey, like, you are cheating the system. Good on you. Like, I don't care if you're drawing,
furry porn
7-Eleven symbols for like a mini mart or something. It's like you're still cheating the system. Like, technically we should all be like stacking bricks and doing like manual labor, so like the fact that we're able to cheat the system and somehow make a living doing creative of any sort is,
I don't know. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I agree with you in some form, but it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't be cheating the system just because we're able to do what we love. I mean, people should have value enough for art that they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, look at the marketplace, though. Oh, go ahead, Scott. You got that thing.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I wanted to probably get to the point where we're wrapping up and bringing it back around. So I'll kind of let you do that, Ryan. Say what you're going to say, and then we'll.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at the thing as like everybody wants to consume content, but nobody values content because everything's a fire hose, everything's a buffet, and it's like available 24/7. So like, but it's also by the same token, like, once things feel kind of decriminalized, like even like, getting like black market, like DVDs or whatever, like the further something feels like removed from feeling like you're shoplifting the thing, the more apt somebody is to do that thing and not really think of anything of it, like pirating movies or whatever. So like what creatives do has value. You should be paid for it, but will you? Question mark. So.
All right.
Wait.
Okay,
Sorry, I have to tack onto that because I agree with you, Ryan. And I think one of the coolest things in the world is the realization of, like everything in our society, at least in American society, runs on capitalism. And it's very much like free market kind of nonsense where it's like what the value is. Like for me, for instance, according to that parameter, it would be like what my value is what Ryan values it at, or what Scott values it at, right? And if there's enough Ryan and Scotts who value me high, then like my value is high. But the cool thing about art that screws with that whole system is like anyone with half a brain knows that like Lady Gaga, right? Like has great pipes and can sing really well, but has not written a song nearly close as good as the Pixies. And if you make that claim, you're an idiot. Like, I don't care. And what's beautiful about art is that like art is cool because it kind of supersedes like the whole capitalist system where it's like making art has value, expressing yourself has value, like putting yourself out there has value. And whether it's a monetary value or not, it's a value that goes beyond money and that kind of freaks out capitalists. And that's kind of the point of art. So yeah. So just capping on top of Ryan, like point being, like outside of like the monetary value art should have, like there are things about art, about life that go way beyond just like monetary value, and I think it's sad if we're in a society where like our only value is based on income or money. So yeah.
Ryan, you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean I think they're, again, going back to 80-20, there are greater values even than monetary value. Like if you have certain principles and things like that, like by a certain extent, no amount of money should make you deviate from those if you hold them close enough. And in 80-20 sense, you have to figure out what that is for you.
Yeah.
Well said. All right. So we'll go around. So Josh, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Amazon.com by searching for Two Stories. And you can also find me at quarterlystories.com. But Amazon.com, Two Stories, buy my graphic novel, support art, because that literally is something where I knew from the get-go that what I was making was not necessarily a profitable decision, but I knew it would be awesome. So go support awesome art that may not make profit. Yeah.
All right. And Ryan, where can everyone find you?
Okay, well, you can go buy Josh's book over at Amazon, but if you want to just look on my
Ryan.
If you want to look at my art, you can go to the dreamsendarts.com, which will take you to my print shop, my YouTube channel, my Instagram, all the things.
Ryan, are you still selling those limited edition color?
Why, yes, I am. So, yeah. So this is awful. I hate framing this. But yeah, so these limited edition in Pale Blush Dreams are available over on my website. So you
definitely go check out Ryan's stuff. I mean, if you just saw the thumbnail for this, you can get a little bit of an idea. But it's very original. It's very cool, the stuff that he's doing. So go check out Ryan's stuff at Dream Syn Arts, and check out his YouTube channel. It's Dream Syndicate Art Dolls is the name of the YouTube channel.
That'll get you there.
The link. Yeah. And these links are in the description of the video too. So obviously you can't click on the screen for that, but that you can click in the description. There'll be a direct link. And as far as me, you can find my circworks.com, and also, like I said, right now for super cheap, I've got these shirts, Young and the Dead. Basically, if you've read my comic, if you're a fan of my comic, I'm just trying to sell like maybe 10 more shirts, and then I get bumped up into the next tier where I can. It'll
and they fit
help me out.
well. They're fashionable. They're comfortable.
The tagline is great. No zombies allowed. Like that's such a, like a little
Yeah.
kid.
And
thing,
that's what we're
like, no boys, no girls allowed. That's such
exactly,
a good
and that's the one thing I've never, and the idea was if this is that's kind of the name of this series. Like if I ever do another Young and the Dead, it would be something else after this story's over. But I never mention that. It's on all the books, but I never say Young and
It's
the
really
Dead.
clever, and you should mention it as a part of the
I
brand.
should. I think I used to in the beginning, but then it just got so. I mean, even now when I abbreviate it, it's just YNTD. So it's like because it gets to be a mouthful. But yeah, I probably should start when I'm pitching it. I should probably say that a little more. So
God, how do people keep track of this crazy channel? It yesterday it felt like it was on my channel, and then like a day later it's on your channel. Who the hell's channel is it on? What day is it on? How do I keep track?
I was going to get to that, Josh. So you thought I'd forget. No. So the way that this works, the Artcasters, we do this show every single week, but it's not always here on my channel. Next week it'll be on Josh's channel. Then it'll probably bounce back to my channel, usually on Thursday nights, but it could be on a different night. So if you want to know when we're going to go live, if you want to know who our guest is, because we always have a different guest. It's always me and Josh and typically a different guest. This week it's Ryan. Next week it'll be somebody else. But if you want to know all that information, there is a link in the description of this video, and all you have to do is click on that and sign up for our mailing list. We don't spam you or anything like that. All it is usually about 30 minutes before we go live. We send you the link to the stream. We tell you who's going to be on. We tell you what the topic is. Because YouTube doesn't always share that information, so definitely check that out. So I want to thank Ryan for coming on. Especially it was kind of short notice, and he came through for us. So thanks, Ryan. I also want to thank everyone in the chat, and I just wanted to pull this one chat up because it struck me as funny. Because some person says, someone that doesn't. Something that doesn't sell a lot at conventions, cupcakes, you'd make thousands, and I have seen somebody selling cupcakes at a convention, and they were killing it. So,
people with food.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what with the laws about selling food. It was totally legit, but they were selling them there. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. So thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks to everyone watching this after the fact. And we will see you next week.